Okay, hello, welcome back to another game of chess. Today I'm playing e4 as per usual. My opponent decides to respond with. They go for a Sicilian. Of course, we're going to essay the Mengerini here with a3. A very venomous line indeed, especially against knight e6, where we can play b4 here, offering up a full pawn, which they don't accept. My heart is shattered into a million pieces. However, when playing this, if they don't accept your gambit, just push. In almost every instance, just pushing is a good idea. That's baffling. I'd have at least imagined they'd go like across and try and bring the knight to g6, or I don't know, some knight d4, c3, bring the knight back to e6. Who knows, but at the very least not this. Okay, you know what? I'm going to play bishop c4, developing the bishops before the knights, generally just because I want to be able to play d3, I think. At least I want the option to play d3. We'll play knight f3 now, maybe I'll hold on and play d4 in the future, but as my opponent's pawn structure is very telling of where they're going to put their bishop, I was thinking d3 might be a reasonable resource to stabilize this pawn here. Let's go for it now. A little odd, not how I usually play chess. However, I'm thinking maybe what we could do is castle kingside. I mean, of course, they break with d5. I'll take and probably just maybe even slot my bishop back to a2. Effectively, I'm hoping to get the double snipers with the bishops here. And I definitely think I'll be able to achieve such a thing. I mean, a2 might be a little unnecessary to put the bishop all the way back there. I'd imagine we see bishop e7 and castles from my opponent. I think I'll play rook e1 and most likely go knight d2, knight f1, knight g3 as a means to get my knight over to the king side. I'm not very comfortable with how I've played this opening. I generally prefer to tend towards opposite side castling positions. Clearly that's never going to be the case when I'm playing, you know, a3, b4. I'm not going to be castling queenside there, but I don't know, this is definitely feels a little passive and positional rather than anything exciting and tactical. However, it's always good to take a little step out of the comfort zone, and I think I haven't played it completely moronically just yet. I'd imagine at some point d4 would be a good idea. I guess we could also drop the bishop back to b1. If we saw like d4 and they decided to respond with c4, trying to shut down my bishop, I could play c3 and bishop b1 and I'd be quite happy about that. You know what? Let's do it now. Let's do it now because I don't really want to let them push. They do play c4. I kind of want to fix their pawn here so that their bishop is rubbish. And now I'm going to fix the pawn structure like this, as I mentioned, because in general, the direction in which your central pawn chain points, I know this isn't much of a huge center, it's slightly off-center in fact, but the direction in which that pawn structure points is generally speaking the easiest direction to attack. You know, it's quite hard, especially for a bishop, for instance, as you see, epitomized here by the bishop on b7, to attack, you know, against the grain here. So what you see my opponent trying to do is, you know, open this up to get their bishop to be vaguely useful again. I'm not really incentivized to give them that opportunity, I don't think. Although, should I take this, it does entirely destabilize c4. Takes here. I guess I've got to move my knight first though, then maybe they can defend c4. I'd rather not lose my pawn on c3 actually. You see, I do like leaving this pawn structure, but at the end of the day, taking here and after the pawn takes, playing knight d2, attacking both of these pawns, I do think just, you know, this is an opportunity to win a pawn here. So quickly switching between what we're playing for here, instead of a kind of positional structural element playing against a bishop that is not quite gelling with its pawn structure, we switch up to a more tactical idea, trading the knights and going after two very weak pawns. Also, our bishop will now be far superior on this diagonal than it was before. Maybe even we still come to b1 at some point, but I do think, yeah, this is quite convincing to me. Now, they go for h2. The question is, do I care? The answer, probably I should. I could play h3 very easily. I could even play knight f1 if I really wanted to. I'm not quite sure I do, though. I could play queen h5. Is kind of interesting, honestly. Putting a little pressure along here. Maybe that bishop could kind of sync up. But knight f6, I don't know, I've got to drop back. It doesn't seem unreasonable to get the queen out in that way. Especially, in fact, queen h5, knight f6, and then queen h4. We defend this, keep a little pressure on e4, in fact. But it also does seem to give them knight f6 for free, whereas h3 maybe just, you know, solves this problem. And then I can cash in on one of the pawns. I'd rather not play g3, because I'd imagine they could very much sacrifice a pawn here to open up this gorgeous bishop. You know, I really don't want to have super weak light squares around there. Okay, yeah, I'll play h3. We're going to take the target away from h2. I think the idea of going queen h5 and coming back was not horrific, but at the same time, I'm not particularly incentivized to go for it, and I do think I just improved my opponent's knight for them, basically with a free tempo. It also means that this battery still has its target on h2, and it's just that my queen's defending it, rather than kind of being a little more elusive, a little more evasive. Maybe the queen goes to h5 in the future, especially when this opens up, especially if they bring the rook to this e8, so they do push. I was thinking this might happen. Now, even though I haven't really weakened my light squares too much with this move, they still push anyway. They're going to lose the pawn, so they might as well gambit it to open up the bishop here, but I'm massively going to take with my rook. using this as an opportunity to lift the rook here. If I take him with the pawn, all my dark squares become very weak, especially g3, which I would not be very happy about. So instead, I mean, yeah, you can do that, but I can just, you know, I'm chilling with my pawn structure. I could go all the way back. I might have to go all the way back. I mean, I guess I also have this move. I could give up a rook here, have the bishop pair, and have a good time. That does seem very, very possible indeed. But am I just sacking material for the sake of it? Kind of, yes. So most likely, I think I'm just gonna step back to e1 here, having successfully won the pawn by taking the knight and then dropping my knight back to d2. Whatever other shenanigans then occurred, not particularly relevant. They do now grab my knight, so I can't take this pawn. Although, again, it's still this very much isolated pawn, not in the strict sense of the term isolated pawn. I mean, there is a pawn in the b file, but this pawn is being held hostage by my bouncer of a b pawn, just bullying it. So we can definitely put pressure on c4 and maybe even look to win it. I'm wondering, do we play queen takes or bishop takes? I think bishop takes. I think, you know, we hold this pawn here, which I don't know, maybe could become relevant if we do manage to win the pawn on c4. Also, the queen can be developed along the light square diagonal, although actually can it? Because I'm not sure we have very many prospects here. We do now have an unrivaled dark squared bishop without having to sack the exchange, so I'm a little suspicious of my opponent's play here. I may just start with queen e2 and say, you know what, I'm going straight for c4. Why the hell not? At some point I can play a4 maybe. Not entirely sure why I immediately would, but okay, hold on. We just take this. Now we're up 2 clean pawns. We've got a bishop pair. I mean, any trades should most likely help me. If you don't want to trade queens, you do have to keep an eye on f7 now that you've weakened this. You, of course, can't come to e7, so that leaves you with the move queen d7, which, okay, there's nothing wrong with that move, really, but it's not exactly doing anything very scary. Yeah, they do go for it. Okay. I mean, we've got a little passed pawn going on here. And now this bishop's open. I mean, what a gorgeous piece that's going to be. They're probably going to put their rook on c8. It'd be quite nice to play bishop f4 and maybe put that bishop on e5. In fact, I'm thinking bishop f4. If rook c8, maybe I take here. Okay, you know what, bishop f4, I think this definitely improves the bishop to some extent. I'm very happy to put the queen back on d3, basically wherever it's threatened. The other rook comes to c8, which is interesting. I guess they didn't want to allow the trade. Makes sense because they are, of course, down material right now, but I mean, d3 seems like a happy home for my queen, at least for the minute. The bishop, again, gorgeous on a2. Frankly, superb on a2. That piece that I prioritized in the opening is showing me its gratitude for that prioritization. Now, not that, you know, my opponents would be incentivized to, but you can't ever play like g6 if for any reason we provoke that. Maybe we even play queen g6. Oh, queen g6 would be so nasty. Hold on. We'll revisit that if it becomes relevant next move. My opponent putting their rook here, though, does mean that this rook just has no moves. I mean, you don't want to play rook b8, and of course, it has no other legal moves. So now that's interesting. That is very interesting indeed. I am so tempted to play queen g6 right here. You don't understand. Just because I can. But also, we keep an eye on f7. The bishop obviously holding the pin there. We're threatening bishop h6 because of the pin there. So queen here, I don't know, king. See, you move the king to h8 and I can take on f7 all of a sudden with the bishop as well. So I guess if you want to move the king to remedy this pin, you go to f8. Yeah, I guess we're not really achieving a whole lot there. Although we could then reposition the queen back onto g3. Although maybe there's going to be some knight h5 idea. I'm not sure. I really want to make this work somehow. Hold on. What if I play bishop h6 now and you take? And I play queen g6 check. You have to move the king. You have 2 options. Both. Oh my lord, this just works, no? Bishop h6. I wanted to play queen g6 first just because, you know, it's beautiful, but bishop h6, because of this gorgeous light squared bishop, is going to open up and soften this king such that I can play queen and g6 check now, of course. 2 legal moves. I can, if you go to h8, take the knight with check. If you go here, I probably still take the knight, presumably. Okay, that's insane to me. I guess I could have taken the pawn as well. Now if I take the pawn, you can block with the knight. There's no reason not to just take the knight with check. We now are up 3 pawns. This king is disastrously weak. We can take this pawn if we like. I see very little reason to turn down that opportunity. I mean, yes, please. I'm now just threatening, you know, maybe checkmate? Yeah, check here and then mate on h6. 4 pawns. We're up 4 pawns. And the thing is, we're not even using any of the pawns. I mean, of course, we're using them in a defensive sense, but this is more the fact that we've torn open our opponent's king. I have queen g6 threatened. At the very least, you're about to lose a rook, and we could very easily trade down into some completely and obviously winning endgame. It would be quite nice to win without trading down, though. To continue this king hunt. Bishop h6, brilliant move for sure. I feel like this has been such a dominant game. I kind of hated my opening, actually. But all of a sudden, I guess d4 was probably the key move, and then, yeah, then putting the knight there, taking and going back with my knight, I think they just, you know, their center collapsed. And once their center collapsed, I don't know, you give me a bishop pair, you let me put pressure on another weak pawn, you just give me this gorgeous bishop on a2, the mother of all these tactics. Without this bishop, I mean, surely we could not have birthed such tactics. To prolong the metaphor unnecessarily, the tactics have been gestating ever since the bishop. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'd imagine honestly we see resignation here. I would not want to play this on as black. I can't believe it took me so long to see bishop h6 though. I was trying to play queen g6 first. Forgive me, it's currently midnight and I just got back from a brutal back day at the gym and I frankly have no sugar left in my brain. Is my opponent just gonna let the clock run out? That would kind of suck. How long have they been thinking? Like 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes? Maybe they won't. Nice. Let's analyze that game. Okay, so here we are in the analysis with a 94% accurate game. What? 1 mistake, 0 inaccuracies, 0 blunders, and a smooth as hell graph, giving my opponent at most minus 0.7 advantage. And then, you know, slowly building. Maybe there was a little questionable move with bishop f4. Apparently there might have been something more convincing there. But then just converting, really. Let's have a quick look through. So we'll turn on the Masters database, although I'd imagine that's not going to serve us very well because immediately you played a Mengarini b4 and then instead of accepting our gambit they played b6. So yeah, immediately there are no games. But if we turn on the engine here, b5 is the best move, so that general principle of just push the pawn if they don't accept your gambit in this line holds true at least here. And then yeah, instead of coming forward they go back, which again is only inaccurate. We put the bishop on c4 and then play knight f3, d3 here, which is the best move despite the engine for some reason evaluating it minus what? Okay, so on closer inspection, d3 is actually the best move. So this plan of playing bishop c4 and d3 probably was quite a good setup. They go for d5, of course, takes, dropping that bishop back to a2, from which it is just sniping forever. And all we need to do is open it up. Now, when I went for castles, rook e1, did this little situation bringing the knight over here. That was all reasonable development, but then d4 I think was the key move if we turn on the engine. Or maybe we had knight f5. I didn't even consider knight f5. What's wrong with me? What is wrong with me? Knight f5 is just so obvious to be considered. What the hell? Okay, not sure. Some of you may have been screaming at your screen for me to at least consider that. Instead, d4, definitely a reasonable move. What they shouldn't have done is play c4 though, because from this point, if we look at the graph, after I play c3 and they come in with the knight, things only got worse. My plan was, if they hadn't come in with the knight, to move the bishop, move the rook, and then put the bishop on b1 and just have this staring here forever. Maybe go queen c2, form a battery, throw in a checkmate. Generally get some ideas of an attack rolling. However, taking here and then coming back with the knight, best move. Playing h3, not quite best move maybe. Instead g3 was the best move. No, h3, g3. Again, fluctuations that are within ±1 of the 0 evaluation, I'm not too worried about. I don't think practically for anyone at my level, or even really the level until you get to like super grandmaster, worrying about the difference between +0.6 and +0.3. Okay, I guess I can't speak for masters, but you know, at least at my level and significantly above my level as well, the difference between +0.6 and +0.3 really is not gonna, you know, that's not what you should be focusing on to get better at chess. So h3, definitely very reasonable here. The pawn's pushed, I take with the rook, and it was the best move, I believe, to push the pawn for my opponent, which does make sense. However, we do claim the extra material, we go back, and then this just didn't make much sense to me. I mean, I know you didn't want to lose the pawn here, but holding onto that pawn to trade off your bishop pair, little odd. We then play queen e2, very reasonable, putting pressure on the pawn. Here, take this, and then I played bishop f4, which it didn't like. I instead should have played queen d3 here. Apparently after bishop f4, they can take the rook. Of course, I'd recapture, and then what? Oh, apparently they have bishop d5, queen e2 though. And then trades here, and they can take on b5 in the end. Okay, I guess that makes sense. Didn't really think about that line, but that would have been a tactic for them to win a pawn. My opponent clearly didn't see that. That's the only reason bishop f4 is anything other than a very decent move. They, of course, bring the rook over. Finding that nice d3 square for the queen makes a whole lot of sense. And then bishop h6. Let's quickly look at the evaluation on which move is the best. It likes bishop e5. Let it think for a little longer, please. Please. Oh, I guess bishop h6 actually isn't the best move because they didn't have to take. And so actually bishop e5 is more convincing because of what we do, shutting off that e-file, disconnecting everything, just having a beautiful bishop. However, this is absolutely an excellent move and probably the best move practically speaking, because after they took queen g6, the king moves, we take the knight here, bishop takes here, and I mean, I don't really know what they've got to do here. They've got to play rook g8 to not allow me this check. I can definitely just take this. They could play rook takes, but then rook e7, so they play king takes. I play rook e7 anyway. What do they reply? Oh, they just sack the queen and then desperately pray to not get mated with rook f8. and of course I'm then going to walk in and very easily checkmate my opponent. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed that game in a very unorthodox opening, something which I don't usually play. But I think that was maybe a lesson in a bit of trusting the process by, you know, having that bishop nice and developed on the diagonal and then trying to play with the pawns to optimize that bishop and then spotting the tactics that stemmed from it. But, you know, dismantled the opponent's center, dismantled the opponent's kingside, and took home the elo. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.